Hey, Grayson Carter here, and welcome to today's training on campaign troubleshooting. So it would be awesome if every campaign that we ever launched just did phenomenally well. We got tons of likes, tons of comments, and tons of clients out of. But unfortunately, a lot of times things just don't go that way, at least not the first time around. And it takes a little bit of troubleshooting to find the right combination of messaging and technical setup in order to make the campaign perform the way that we want it to perform. So really the goal of today's training is to give you a systematic way to troubleshoot, diagnose, and fix an underperforming campaign. And so I'm going to walk through a few of the places where people usually get stuck and what you can do about it to try to increase the performance, get more engagement, and ultimately get more clients from your campaign. So the first place we're going to start is having your ad disapproved or not getting it approved when you're trying to get it approved. So here's a couple of things we can check if that's happening. So first of all, do you have a track record of approvals in your account? So have you gone through and seasoned the account properly? If we have a track record of approvals, it's more likely that our ads from here on out are going to get approved. If we have a brand new cold account without any seasoning in it, they're going to look at our ads with under a finer microscope. So if you haven't done the seasoning process yet, make sure to go back and do that. Are you calling out personally identifying information in the ad? Facebook is really strict on this these days. So if you're saying things like, do you have IBS? Do you have diabetes? Sometimes that can be looked down upon and Facebook just isn't going to approve it. So I highly recommend to compare your ad against the varying policies. Are you making unsubstantiated claims? Now I put unsubstantiated in quotes because even though you may be able to decrease somebody's symptoms by 50%, Facebook doesn't know that that's 100% true. So if you're making claims like that, we may want to change that up or switch that around because there's a good chance that that's why it's not getting approved. So you may want to just compare that against their policy to see if you can make the ad fit to the policy a little better. If it's still not getting approved, I would recommend reading through all the policies again. So there's a handful of them on there. I don't remember exactly which numbers they were, but it was the personal identifying information, the unsubstantiated claims, and a few other ones that we want to make sure that we just read through them, compare them to our ads, and see if we can find where maybe we're kind of going astray and not abiding by their specific policies. The next thing is we need to check, is the image size correct? So it has to be 1200 by 628. Definitely check that. I see a lot of people posting because you can post different size images on Facebook. However, if it's going to be turned into an ad, it has to be 1200 by 628. Is there too much text on the image? We always want to run our images through the 20% rule or 20% text tool. I'll put a link to it below this video. But you just want to make sure that you take that ad, if you put any image or any text on the image, to run it through that to make sure that we're under the 20% rule. Because if it's not, if there's too much text, it either won't be approved or it just won't run very well. And then lastly, have you tried appealing? We've had a number of people that the ad's been disapproved. It looks fine, like they can't find any problems with it, and so they just appeal it, kind of make their case to why it should be approved, maybe including their credentials and what they're trying to accomplish with it, and it ends up getting approved that way. So like I'd said earlier, 80% of the approvals go through by just a machine checking out the ad. And so if there's certain things that may be kind of borderline, there's a chance that it's probably just going to disapprove. But if we appeal it, it's going to force a real person to look at it, and they have more discretion whether to approve it or not. So the next place that campaigns stop working is that when our ad is approved, but it's not performing. So maybe it's been approved, but we're just not getting any likes or comments on it. And so here's a few of the things that we can go through to check and see what's going on. So the first thing is we want to make sure the technical side of it's working properly. So again, is the image the right size? Is it the 600 by 628? Is there too much text on the image? If there's more than 20% text, usually it gets approved, but Facebook is not going to run it or not going to run it nearly as often as it could. So maybe we're just not getting quite the reach that we want it to. Is the ad only boosted to Facebook? Now that Facebook owns Instagram and the audience network, there are options to be able to show our ads on those other platforms, but we don't want to use them. We only want our ads to be showing up on the Facebook newsfeed. So you can check that if you go into the ads manager. When you go to edit the ad set, you can see which platforms it's targeting. And again, we only want it on the mobile and desktop Facebook newsfeed. Are your audiences large enough? So I've never seen anything work with a audience of less than 1,000 people. Ideally, it's more like 5,000, if not 50,000 or more. So if it's under 1,000, chances are the ad just isn't going to run. So we're going to either need to expand our radius or find some other audiences that are larger. Is your radius targeting large enough? So if you live in a small town and there's just not that many people, we may need to increase that radius to encompass more people. Another thing that's a little tricky to figure out at times is do your audiences have a high affinity to other appropriate audiences? So we've gone through and built our list of audiences using the Audience Insights tool, but we want to make sure that the audiences that we're using have a high affinity for other audiences that we think would be a good fit. Sometimes I don't know why it happens. Sometimes there's certain audiences that it sounds like they would be a great fit, but when we look at the affinity, the other groups are really like strange groups that don't really seem to fit. Like it doesn't really make sense. And so we just want to double check that if we're targeting audiences that we think would be really fruitful and they're not, just to go in and maybe plug that audience back into the Audience Insights tool and see what sort of other groups come up under the affinity. Once the ad has been approved, have you shared it on your personal page and liked it? So sometimes all it takes is if you can share it on your personal page and get a couple of your friends to like and comment on the ad, that kind of kicks off the engagement process for Facebook. And so it's showing them that, hey, this is a good ad and we need to show it to more people. So it can help if you have a mom, dad, sister, friend, whoever, a spouse, partner that can comment on the ad when it first gets published. That's going to really kick things off. So I recommend doing that, even if they're not necessarily going to become a client, just to start that engagement process. Okay, so we're still talking about the ad being approved, but not necessarily performing very well. So the next thing is now that we've kind of checked out the technical side, is the messaging right? And so these are kind of the messaging checks that we can comb through our ad to make sure that the messaging is working well. So the first thing is that, are you offering specific results, not vague get healthy results? So we want to make it as clear as possible what the opportunity is for somebody to get away from their present pain. And so the more clear we can be about what that looks like, the more effective our ad's going to be. If we're just saying like, hey, get healthy, have a better relationship with food, that's all fine and good, but get healthy means a whole different number of things to a lot of different people. So we want to be as specific as possible about the results that we're able to get for somebody. The next thing to look at is our offer using scarcity, both with limited availability and limited time? So are we calling out a specific number of people we want to work with? Are we saying like when there's a deadline, hey, we're only looking to work with 5 people over the next couple of days? Making sure that we're using scarcity in the ad. Is the call to action clear and simple? So we should be asking somebody to either comment on the ad or to PM us directly. We don't want to be sending people straight to Acuity. I've seen this happen where people think, oh, instead of having to email them, I'll just put my link, the link to my calendar in the ad. That just doesn't work. We don't want to be asking them to do too many things at once. We want to make the barrier to entry as low as possible. So just having them comment or message us is the best way to go. The next thing is, are we offering tools or shortcuts instead of forcing them to change something within themselves? So unfortunately, with the sort of work that most of you do, there are going to be things that people need to change about themselves. But the more that we can kind of take that burden off of their shoulders and put it onto ours, and give them tools and shortcuts to be able to use so that they feel like they have no opportunity to fail, the more likely they are to come on board as a client. So if you have any branded like processes or branded tools that you use that help them get away from that pain and get towards Heaven Island, that's going to be very effective. If we just keep saying, hey, you need to be more disciplined, you need to change this about yourself, those are all places where people feel like they can fail. And so they're less likely to take us up on the work that we're going to do together. So another way to say this is, can we do more of the heavy lifting for them? So instead of saying, hey, you're going to learn how to eat better, saying, hey, you're going to follow our 5-step Eat to Thrive formula to be able to put together your perfect meal. And so at least with that, it feels like, hey, there's this tool, there's this thing outside of myself, this special 5-step Eat to Thrive formula, that if I follow that, that's going to be doing the work for me. It's not something that I need to change inside of myself. So it makes it feel like I can't fail if I'm following this 5-step formula. Are we using get over learn to make things more tangible? So it's always better if somebody can get something rather than learn something. I remember hearing a golf example where somebody would rather spend $2,000 on a new set of clubs to help them knock a few strokes off their swing than to spend $2,000 on golf lessons to knock a few extra strokes off their swing or off their game. So the more things that we can give them that they get as opposed to learn, that's going to make it more tangible. And again, it makes it feel like there's less opportunity for them to fail because it's something outside of themselves that they're getting. Now, the last thing, and this is a bit tough to evaluate when it's your own offer, but does our offer sound like what everybody else is promising? So even though you may know that what you're doing is different, is the wording that you're using, does it make it sound like every other offer that exists out in the marketplace? So if we need to be meaningfully different from what other offers exist, how can we reposition our offer so that we don't sound exactly like what everybody else is promising them? Okay, so maybe you're getting a ton of comments on your ad, and then you're sending the emails, but nobody's actually scheduling. So the first thing we want to check is if your calendar is embedded on your website, are there other links on the page? So when somebody comes to our calendar and they're actually in the process of picking a time and filling out the survey, we don't want to have any other distractions on the page. We don't want to have a header or links or a sidebar or anything else that may distract them from completing the sign-up process. Next, is there plenty of availability on your calendar on different days and different times? So we want to make it as easy as possible and as flexible as possible for people to book when they want. Now, I'm not saying you need to work 24 hours a day or work on weekends or that sort of thing. But if you don't have the amount of clients coming in that you'd like, trying to be as flexible as possible so that there's plenty of availability for people to book when's convenient for them, the better it's going to be for you. Also, is the survey or application clear and working properly? And this is important that you check it on both desktop and mobile. So I've seen sometimes where people set this up on their computer and it works great on a desktop, but when you go to the mobile phone, it just doesn't position properly. It's all wacky. So it's important to test this on a variety of different devices to make sure that it's working properly. Are you using scarcity in the email? So when we're sending the email, we're saying, hey, congratulations, you've secured your spot, but you need to respond within the next 24 hours. Essentially making it feel like they have something that they can lose if they don't act now. Also, does the email reiterate their escape from pain? So escape from pain is always going to be more powerful than working toward or than entrance into heaven. So escape from hell is always better than entrance into heaven. So we can reiterate that, like, what's the benefit of working with us? Why should they actually click through and sign up to get on a call with us? And we can do that by reiterating whatever that pain is that we're hoping to help them get away from. Now, if we've been sending these, sometimes just the time of year or the timing of it can be a little weird. So we may need to send a follow-up email that says, hey, we still have a few spots left. We're going to be shutting this down, and then pick a day, 2 or 3 days in the future, and say we still have a few spots left, but if you'd like to secure one, you'll need to do one by X date in the future. Okay, so maybe you're doing plenty of clarity calls, but nobody's actually signing up and taking you up on your offer. So the first thing I'd ask is, well, how many have you done? If you've done only a handful of calls, unfortunately, that's just not enough to know whether things are going properly or not. I've had streaks where as many as 15 people in a row will say no to an offer that I'm making, and I'll start to doubt myself, think, oh, I need to change this up. Nobody wants to pay this much money. I must be doing something wrong. People don't want this anymore. But then say like the next 6 people will end up saying yes. So unfortunately, you have to do a lot of calls in order to start to understand whether is it just luck of the draw, or is there actually something wrong with your process or your offer? So if you've only done a few, just keep plugging away, keep doing it. You're going to get more practice. You're going to get better at handling objections. You're going to get better at describing your offer. So if you've only done a handful, unfortunately, you're just going to have to keep pushing through. And until you've done maybe 20 or 30 of them, you're not going to have a real good idea of what your close ratio is until you've done at least that many. And that's like the bare minimum. You really can't even make a decision until you've made several hundred calls to know what your close ratio is. Now, along those same lines, when you're on the call, are you discovering what it's costing them to stay where they are now? And that can be like what's costing them physically, emotionally, and financially. Now, what most people don't consider is that there's also a cost to doing nothing. So one of the examples that I've used many times is the American Diabetes Association came out with a stat that said that the average diabetic incurs an additional $7,500 worth of medical expenses every year in relation to their disease. So just because somebody chooses to not work with you to work on their diabetes doesn't mean that they get to save that money. They're going to be spending that money on medical expenses, time off work, being sick, medications. So the cost of doing nothing may actually be costing them more than working with you and getting this problem resolved once and for all. There's also a physical and emotional toll for somebody having to deal with these things. Like, how much are they missing out on of going out with their friends, spending time with family? What are their energy levels like? What's their sex life like? All these things take a toll on us or on your clients. And it's important for us to discover what those costs are on the call, so that when they get to the point of making a decision to invest several $1,000s with you, if we've done a good job discovering how expensive, how painful these other things are, it's going to make the investment in our program seem like just a drop in the bucket. Another thing to check is, are you talking too much during calls? If we keep jumping in every time somebody gives us a short answer, sometimes we don't quite get the depth that we're looking for when we're having this conversation with somebody. So making sure that we're giving people plenty of time to talk, to sit with that, sit with the weight of their problem, so they really start to understand like how bad things are. If they don't realize that in their own head by the time we get to the point where we're making our offer, there's a good chance that they're just not going to sign up. So we want to make sure they have plenty of time to really think through what it's costing them to continue doing what they're doing. Are we consoling or justifying their failures? So if they have been trying different things and failing at it, and we keep saying, or if we say or imply, hey, that's okay, it's not your fault, that's not what we're there to do on the call. We're not trying to acknowledge or console or justify any of those failures. We're trying to get to the heart of what it's costing them to stay where they're at, and then make them an offer to get away from that present pain. Next is, do you believe 100% that your service is worth every penny you're charging? If you aren't sold that your service is worth 110% of what you're charging, there's no way your client's ever going to believe it. And so the first sale you have to make in any sale is to yourself. And so if there's any sort of doubt or insecurity about what your service is worth, that's something that you need to work on to make it so that you can get to a point where there's no doubt in your mind that what you're charging is worth every penny. And once you've done that, then there's a much higher likelihood that your client is going to believe it as well and sign on. Now, lastly, during the calls, are you describing your offer as escape from hell and not like all the details of your program, like how many visits they get, how long it is, what sort of handouts they get? We need to stay away from the technical side of how we're going to be working together, like how many visits, how long they are, duration, that sort of thing, and focusing more on what is it that they are going to be able to escape from? What present pain are we able to get them away from? What's that transformation that we can help them achieve while they're under our care? And so simply by repositioning our offer from, hey, this is how you're going to get this many sessions, it's going to be this long, to, hey, here's the 3 main transformations that we're going to be making. It's going to go a long way in showing them that, yep, this is exactly what I need. That's the sort of transformation I want to make. How do we get started? So that is it for campaign troubleshooting. Depending on where your campaign ends up, this should help you kind of methodically go through and make some adjustments and determine which part of the campaign is not working. So take this, work through your campaigns. Hopefully they work great from the get-go, but I realize that isn't necessarily realistic. So hopefully this will help you troubleshoot, get those things back on track, and start cranking out clients for you. So that's all for today's video. Thanks for watching.